So India is actually an incredibly dynamic startup ecosystem. For entrepreneurs who are looking at this market, it's an incredibly large market.
皆さんこんにちは。世界のスタートアップ情報を発信するスタートアップバックパッカーです。今回の動画ではインドの現地ベンチャーキャピタルをインタビューし、インドスタートアップの強みや凄さ、そして課題について、議論していきます。世界一の人口を誇るインド、非常に面白いマーケットになっておりますので、ぜひ最後までご視聴ください。
So now I'm with Nrutya, the partner of 314 Capital in India.
So I'm Nrutya Madhapa. I'm a partner at 314 Capital. 314 Capital is a leading early stage venture firm in India. We manage over $500 million in capital. About 50% of our investors are global and 50% are institutional Indian. Several large strategic players from around the world, and in Japan in particular, we count amongst our LPs and partners the Sujits Group. We have Mitsuho Bank, we have Suzuki, and several others who are joining us as we speak. So our relationship, of course, with Japan has been long from the LP front and our investor pool itself, and we learn a lot from their strategic heft and what they've seen in their countries, and that drives what we invest in. We have over 80 active portfolio companies today. We've invested in a total of 100 and successfully exited 20, and we invest across multiple sectors. So just quickly, I think some large companies in the region that are actually, we were the first checks into. We are in Licious, which is the largest online meat companies, one of the most valuable consumer companies in the country today. We're in a company called Darwinbox, which is actually scaled across South and Southeast Asia. It's an HRMS, so HR management software system across this entire part of the world and scaling into the US. And personally, I actually joined the firm about 4 years ago. Pranav, who's my other founding partner, and I were classmates at Stanford. So I'm a trained engineer by training. I'm a Stanford engineer, did my undergrad and master's there, worked in the Bay for a while, got my MBA at HBS, and then moved back about 8 years ago to actually lead a couple of high growth companies in India across multiple sectors, and then joined forces about 4 years ago to help lead 314 Capital.
Yeah, what I really want to know is more on the current strategy for investments now, especially because we had COVID and now the funding winter is here. I'd love to know how you're actually changing your strategy.
So India is actually an incredibly dynamic startup ecosystem, and specifically in the last 8 years since I've been back, I think even our most wildly optimistic predictions of how this ecosystem was going to evolve actually fell short of what actually happened, right? And COVID was a catalyst for a lot of these things. A lot of companies started emerging, for instance, within health, within deep tech. Several different ways to connect people who are doing things virtually emerged. Startups and companies started buying software more. So here, large enterprises were not very keen on sort of adopting Indian software to sort of run their own operations. So a lot of those shifts happened. Consumption patterns on the ground changed rapidly. So again, data is freely and massively available to the Indian population today. And because of that, the way they consume media and entertainment, where they choose to spend their time online, how they transact, who's transacting, right? Like the startup ecosystem of about a decade ago was maybe built for about 50 to at max 100 million people who lived within urban centers across the country, and they were the urban sort of elite. So it was more like 10 to 50 million people. So that was the entire market, even though we're a country of 1.4 billion people. But over the last 8 years, that market has truly expanded, driven by this penetration of, again, data, cheap data, freely available across the country, payment infrastructure and frameworks laid down by the government themselves. So it was like this crazy inflection point or the perfect storm over the last decade or so in India that's caused an explosion of innovation to happen, driven almost exclusively by startups. So that's kind of what drove it. And what we look at, and to your point, how that has changed today, we're continuously tracking all of those things that I mentioned. At 314, we're a very research-led firm. So the way we invest is doing our own primary research on the ground. So we form sort of a thesis about a specific space for a specific period in time, and then sort of try and find the very best teams building the right kinds of models within those ideas. So from all of the sectors that we invest in, we already know the kinds of macro trends that will drive an industry.
Nice, yeah.
So I'll give you an example, right? Out of our fund 4, we've taken bets in specialty chemicals. So it's a very unusual niche industry, not what you would think when you think VC investing, but it's what actually drives everything, right? Like whether it's medication, whether it is manufacturing of paints, colors, whether it's food, etc. At the very core of it is different kinds of specialty chemicals. And we saw a massive shift of that manufacturing happening into India. We saw macro trends. We saw what the government was putting in place as policies. And then we found some incredible entrepreneurs building very IP-led ideas within specialty chemicals. And India, as a market, has traditionally lacked IP in this. Like, we might be a manufacturing center, but we're not creating our own molecules. We're not creating a lot of that. And that was always sort of the formulations were borrowed. So that was the kind of bet that we would take. We would take IP-led, highly scalable bets within a very unusual sector that maybe didn't matter 5 years ago, but is very relevant today based on the research that we're seeing. So it's a continuous, very active process. By the time it becomes a trend, it's already too late. So we need to catch them before they become trendy. So that's where we've done our jobs, right?
Okay. Well, what's your take on like AI then, for example? It's a huge trend now, right?
Yeah.
And I guess many entrepreneurs doing AI in India too, right?
Yeah, so we're actually very actively mapping that. There are some very deeply intentional solutions being built within that, and we will continue to back it. We've actually taken a few positions there. But broadly, what we've seen some of the foundational models do is actually enable very large enterprises like, say, the likes of Oracle or Adobe, etc., who sit on incredible amounts of their own proprietary data through the different products scaled across massive enterprises around the world. So it enables them to actually be able to churn out solutions very, very fast. So what I'm getting at is, when we're looking at startups, we're continuously screening for what could essentially they get sort of outmaneuvered on by some of these larger players. That's where we're caught, which is, what will someone in a large organization with these tech teams, with the right motivations, incentives, and obviously much larger pools of capital available, will they be able to win, or will young startups be able to build? We're extraordinarily bullish. We think AI will infuse everything. But about the bets that we take, it requires for us to find something that is truly foundationally different, or they're uniquely positioned to be able to build, that won't get sort of innovated away by the Adobes or the Oracles or the Googles of the world.
What do you think is like the advantages and the disadvantages of being a startup or a VC in the Indian startup current ecosystem?
I think there's never been a better time. I think for homegrown VCs who truly understand the markets and are continuously iterating on that understanding as well with primary data, there's never been a better time. There are incredible companies led by phenomenal founders, like operators who have built in those spaces for decades, right? Like we invested in a cross-border trade company recently, and the founder of that company led like Foxconn supply chain in India, right? That's the caliber of people who are leaving to found like startups now. And now we're seeing real experts from the large companies step away to form companies in that sector of expertise. So it's never been a better time, short answer. In terms of disadvantages, I think in the Indian ecosystem, we still have not as much domestic capital across the entire spectrum, right? So it's been a place where American capital, European, a lot of Asian capital, particularly from Japan and beyond, who have been very interested in investing in the domestic ecosystem. But we've realized, particularly through 22 and 23, what kept the ecosystem afloat was, of course, really formidable domestic funds across like the early, mid growth stages. And we need more of that, right? Like, we're still very, very early. Like, I think the startup ecosystem and the quality of the companies that are being built are maybe further ahead than where the capital ecosystem is, which is, do we have enough VCs with the right backgrounds? Do we have, say, operator VCs, which is folks who have built companies before and are able to advise and support companies in a very different way? We need all kinds, right, in an ecosystem. It is difficult though, because in 22 or 23, coming out of that, to be able to raise a fund from LPs without really a proven track record is quite difficult. But we're seeing there is increasing interest globally in India, and they are looking for great emerging managers in the country to back.
Do you think VC capital is lacking in India or no?
Yeah, so I think the market is deeper than what we're able to support, and it's not as simple as saying, okay, like looking at the entire amount of capital that is available, but also what stages are they available in, right? So for instance, we have a lot of early stage firms. I think the early stage in India is very well built out. We have extraordinary, like both the global brands or extraordinary domestic brands, and we're like, there are some emerging managers arriving in that, but there is a complete gap in that mid stage, right? So say you're trying to raise your series B's and C's. Over the last 3 to 4 years, we've had some really fantastic firms emerge within it, but there's still a giant dip, right? Like it's actually finally called the valley of death for a company is that Series B raise, because it's one of the hardest rounds to be able to raise, and there's lesser capital. And when we go through times like 22, 23, when all countries around the world are in a recession, all global investors pull back on their investments as well. So yeah.
Okay. That's very insightful. Thank you so much. I guess, there's opportunity for, foreign companies.
Yes, of course. And we're seeing, right, like particularly from Japan, we've seen MUFG and Mitsuho become extremely, like MUFG has an India-focused fund called the Ganesha Fund, which they raised literally to just invest in Indian growth companies. We have a company called, of course, TDK has its TDK Ventures. We were just talking about it before we started. So a lot of CVCs from Japan coming here. JAFCO has always traditionally been quite a bullish investor on India. So actually the Japanese pool of capital looking at India very, very closely is quite hefty. So,
yeah, that's a very good
tendency. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. We're about to wrap up, but if you have any questions or anything you want to add, ask if you have.
Not really an ask, but just a complete open call, right? Like if you're interested to learn more about India, if you're a fund, if you're a large corporation who wants to think about moving into this country and how you navigate that, like reach out to us. We've seen this before. Find friends on the ground, not just us. It'd be great. Like we would love to talk to you. The one very big thing is when you commit to India, you need to commit for the long term. You can't be a tourist. You have to put money on the ground for the longer term. And a lot of people have made good returns in the longer terms, but not in the short term, right? So really important that you sort of really commit to that. And for entrepreneurs who are looking at this market, it's an incredibly large market. So think about this country very intentionally in your global growth plans and find friends like ourselves and other companies on the ground who are very keen to help you sort of move here and scale up your innovations here as well. So as an ask, it is just don't be afraid to reach out, because we're all looking to make deeper partners.
Yeah, definitely check Nurtya's activities too. Thank you so much. It was very insightful. Learned so much from you.
No, absolutely.
And hope to keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Yes, please do.
はい、皆さんお疲れ様です。本当にインドのマーケットは非常に大きくてですね、VC もかなりプレイヤーが多いんですけど、まだまだ今本当に成長しているような企業への投資というところがですね、足りていないというようなところもあったりするので、そういった形でも日本企業が参入することもできますし、もちろんその起業家によるインド進出もやっぱりマーケット、人口がかなり大きいので、もちろんインド大きいんで、全然地域によって文化だとか、マーケットの性質も違うんですけど、特に B2C の消費者向けのサービスだと拡大するとかなり大きなビジネスになるというような特徴を持っていますので、ぜひ、ちょっとインドマーケットもご関心ある方は、ヌルテヤさん、もしくは私でも全然ご連絡いただければと思います。はい、チャンネル登録と、いいね、コメント、ぜひ、していただければ助かりますので、よろしくお願いします。皆さんありがとうございました。